All right. I am absolutely delighted to be with Iowa Medical Society today because the only thing that I get to do is help doctors provide the best care for your patients. And the way that I do that is by helping you focus not on your contract, not on your pay, not on your schedule, but on providing the highest quality care for the patients that you get to serve. Doctors are terrible at contract negotiation. This is not a secret. You should not be good at it. These are the reasons. You got no education and training in it. I did. You don't have access to the salary data, MGMA, Sullivan Cotter. I do. And ultimately, you have spent so much time training to become elite in caring for patients, being at the cutting edge of research. And so, my job is to help you not worry and stress about the business side of medicine and really help you focus all of your attention on the reason you got into medicine, which is providing amazing care to the patients you get to serve. So, in our time together, we just have a few minutes, but the three things you're going to learn how to do today will be first, how to get paid fairly. What is fair pay and how do you get it? Secondarily, I assume that the majority of you have six figures in student loan debt. Let's get your employer to help pay that down. How do we do that? And then lastly, I imagine if you're like the doctors I work with, you probably feel as though you don't ever leave work. So, how can we also build some strategies for you that allow you to spend time doing things that fill your cup? Part of the doctor lifestyle is having time, having resources. And so I'm going to share with you how you can have more time to be able to do the things that you really enjoy. First and foremost, here is the challenge that you are up against. Now, I'm sure this resonates with at least some of the people in the room, but the doctors that I talk with often say, Ethan, I don't want to be greedy. I got into medicine to take care of patients, to do good. And what doctors find is that sometimes there can be tension between the reason you got into medicine to do good and your ability to live the doctor lifestyle, which is the doing well. My job is to remind you that those two things are completely in line with one another. You do not have to be greedy to ask for to be paid fairly. You do not have to be self-centered to not want to work 80 hours a week so that you can bring your best self to your patients. And also, and this happened just to a rheumatologist I talked to last week out of New York, doctors are being asked to do more work, see more patients, shorter visit times, and I suspect some of you have likely had your pay cut. Maybe you haven't had a salary raise in the last 3 to 5 years. That's a pay cut. The cost of living, and look, Ross is a financial guru that you're going to hear from in a second, but the cost of living is going up. And if you haven't had a salary raise in the last 3, 5 years or more, you've taken a pay cut. And if are you good with that? And so I want to remind you that you don't have to necessarily buy into the being stuck in doing more with less. I'm going to help you identify some strategies for you to be paid fairly for your work, get adequate time with your patients, and then again, adequate time with the people that you love. These are the things that reported to Medscape that experienced doctors complain about in the business of medicine. I won't spend a ton of time here, but I suspect that this resonates with at least some of the people in the room, that you feel beat down, burned out, stuck in your job. Like, there's nothing better. But I do want to remind you there is better out there and you have earned better. Doctors deserve better than having MBAs like me make decisions on behalf of your patients. Doctors deserve better than not knowing how to advocate for your patients because you don't have a seat at the table. Meanwhile, MBAs like me are the ones making decisions on behalf of you, your practice, and the patients you care for. So I want to remind you, if you have not heard this before, you deserve better. All of those things lead to the result of physician burnout, which, again, I don't have to tell the people in the room that this is an epidemic. Not only are we on the heels of a global sickness that burned doctors to the brink, but now we've gone back to normal and not taking any time to check in with doctors and say, are you okay? Do you have what you need to do your job? Do you have enough time with patients? Do you have enough time for yourself? And as you all know, and I'm sure the Iowa Medical Society has copious research on this, but doctors are burned out. Doctors are leaving the business of medicine. Doctors are not feeling as fulfilled as they once were in the work that they've dedicated their entire lives to. So my job is to help bring back the joy and bring back the passion by helping you get a fair schedule so you can see your family, by helping you get adequate support and consistent support in your practice, and then ultimately to help you get paid fairly for your sacrifice and commitment to your employer. The challenge is not just that the business of medicine is beating doctors up, it's also that there is a very acute pain point that doctors experience, specifically women physicians. So, generally speaking, women on average are going to earn less than male doctors across all specialties. I often point out that the gap for generalist family medicine, OB, pediatricians is about 25%, which can be $60,000 a year. For specialists, it can be even higher, getting up to six figures, $100,000 a year. And so I ask my women clients, are you providing $100,000 less in value to your patients? Are you cutting corners with your patients that men are not? Of course they're not. In fact, the data actually says the opposite. Women doctors have better patient satisfaction rating. Women doctors spend more time with patients. So, but meanwhile, the business of medicine says, if I'm paying you a salary, I want you to see as many patients as possible, which completely cuts against the idea of quality. The faster you see a patient, inherently it leads to follow that the less quality outcomes you're going to experience. And so it's clearly shown in the data that women who spend more time with their patients have better outcomes, yet we're paying them less money. So that makes me think, is it really about the quality, or is it about how busy you are as a physician? And the answer is yes. It's yes to both, right? It's about the quality and it's about how busy you are. And my job is to help even out that playing field for women physicians. And it's not just women physicians, it's physicians of color as well. Last month, I was with the National Medical Association doing an in-person education for them about the challenges that physicians of color experience relative to their counterparts. So again, when doctors say to me, well, I didn't think the contract was negotiable, or they told me it was standard and I couldn't make any changes, I often amplify that it becomes abundantly important for you to advocate for yourself because there are systemic issues that are going to impact doctors of color and women doctors more than others, and you need to be aware of those. When I worked in hospitals, my job was to quantify how valuable doctors were to my hospital. So often doctors will feel like you're an expense, like you're a cost, but actually doctors are the revenue drivers for hospitals. So while you as a doctor think about patients and brothers and mothers and outcomes, as a hospital executive, I'm thinking about RVUs, cost, turnover. I'm thinking about business metrics. And that's the thing that many doctors often overlook. And so my job is to help translate for the doctors, here's all the things that you care about, the patients you care for, and now here's the financial impact to your hospital. Spoiler alert, these are massive, massive numbers. These are seven-figure numbers. And so when doctors say to me, well, I didn't negotiate for an extra 30, 50, 70,000 because I didn't feel like I deserved it, or I felt like this was good enough, just know that every dollar you don't ask for is going into the pocket of that CEO or those shareholders for that practice or hospital. So if you don't ask for it, somebody's getting it. The hospital's still getting paid that money. And then the final challenge I really want to highlight is the overwhelming burden of debt. Most doctors have six figures in student loan debt, up to around $400,000, and it takes you double-digit years to pay off. So my job is to help you pay that off as quickly as possible. And we get the village to help. So I want your employer to chip in. What we often will ask for is $30,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year that your employer will contribute going towards your student loan debt. Now, again, Ross, the financial guru, can tell you, hey, here's where you prioritize student loan debt. Here's the tax implications that you need to be aware of. My job is to help bring in the Brinks truck from your employer to help pay that down, right? And then Ross will tell you, now here's how you distribute that money. Secondarily, I know a lot of you know this already, but I was with the University of Michigan Plastic Surgery about a month ago, and it was news to the program director that he was eligible for PSLF. And he ended up having 6 figures in student loan debt forgiven because he'd been there for 18 years. And guess who? Guess who didn't say that to him that he was eligible? His employer. So when I did the education for their residents and shared with them that, hey, you've been employed by University of Michigan, which is eligible for PSLF for 18 years, your loans will be forgiven. And when we had our next session in the following semester, those loans were gone. That was 6 figures in value to that doctor simply because he asked. I'm going to pause here and just check in with Sydney M and see if there's any questions before we move on.
I think, is there anyone that has any questions, or is there, I think there might be a couple more people joining here. Any questions? Oh, just. What did you?
Let's see if I can, looks like I cannot share. Let me try that again. Nope, there we go. Okay, cool. So these, I mentioned a moment ago that doctors are really bad at contract negotiation. The reality is you have the same amount of training and education in contract negotiation as I have in medicine. So how silly would it look for me to go to my local hospital, Little's Adventist Hospital, and walk into a clinic, throw on a stethoscope, and start trying to care for patients? Like that would be devastating and just harebrained, right? The same phenomena happens in medicine, but when doctors go in to negotiate their contracts. You have no training or experience in it, and yet you go in and think, oh, well, I know how to do this. And then what you don't understand is that you leave thousands and thousands of dollars on the table. The reason I know that is because I worked 15 years as a hospital executive, and I was the one saying those things to doctors. Well, Dr. Smith, it's a standard contract. You can't make any changes. Well, Dr. Smith, it's just not in the budget. And so my job now that I'm on the other side of the table advocating for doctors' value, I have to tell you the difficult things. When you see patients who have a ton of symptoms that fall in line with directly your specialty, there are some patients, no matter how badly they are from their condition, who won't be treated by you, who refuse to be treated by you. The same thing happens with doctors. I saw a doctor out of New York, a rheumatologist, who had her salary cut in half. That is literally the problem I saw. It's like a family medicine doctor curing some of the most basic procedures that you all see. But that patient with all of those symptoms felt like, I don't need a doctor. And in that situation, that doctor who had her guaranteed salary cut in half felt like, I can do this myself. I don't need help. And the question I have for her is, well, if you got yourself into this situation, how do you envision yourself getting out of it on your own? And it was crickets. So again, I want to remind you, doctors are terrible at contract negotiation, but it's not your fault. First and foremost, no training in time. We talked about that already. You don't get any training in residency and fellowship, or when you get out, for obvious reasons, because if you knew about the imbalance, it would disrupt the current economic system of healthcare. Secondarily, doctors are really good at contract negotiation, or really good at negotiation, but just not in contracts. My family medicine doctor, I talked to her about getting up my blood pressure medication. She said, all right, well, here's the negotiation. You've got to drink less beer, eat less pizza, exercise a few times a week. So, okay, those are the things I'm willing to do for that outcome. And then lastly, doctors are really smart, and sometimes that's intelligence conflates with confidence in other areas, and you end up putting yourself in a tough spot. So I want to encourage you, please do not be the patient with a ton of symptoms who thinks they have an herbal remedy, they can cure it themselves. Get an expert to help you because it will be worthwhile. Also, just as a quick reminder, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. Sydney's keeping an eye on that for us, so we'll be happy to answer any questions that come to mind from your experience and get some free advice. So just so you know, I'm not some schmuck off the street. We've done a ton of education across the country. We prioritize educating residents and fellows all over the country on how to prepare for success. Again, it's not a sales pitch. I want doctors to know how to do this themselves. You don't need me. But what happens is if you try this yourself and you go in to talk with your employer and say, hey, I want a salary raise, I'm just telling you they're going to say no. And so how can you prepare yourself for success when it comes to being paid fairly, getting a schedule that honors your lifestyle goals, and having consistent and adequate support in your practice? Most recently, we had an article published on Kevin MD for how first-time attendings can crush their first contract. That was a ton of fun to write with him. And then we're also going to join their podcast here next month. Whoops. So that's going to be fun as well. This is just a really brief overview of my background. It doesn't really matter that I'm a lawyer. I don't practice law. It doesn't really matter that I have my MBA. Like, yes, I know the numbers and all that stuff. What's the meat is right here. I spent 15 years as a hospital executive doing everything in a hospital you can imagine. And so what puts me in a different position than any other contract person you ever talk with is I was on the other side of the table. I was the one telling you it's not negotiable, Dr. Smith. You can't make any changes, or slow playing you like, well, we'll talk about it when your contract's up. Then when your contract is up, it's too late to talk about it. I was the one saying all of that. So now I get to coach my doctors on here's how you can have success when you go into those contract negotiations. Won't spend a ton of time here. I think the most important thing to know is that my mom's a doctor. This is not just a job for me. This is what I see. I know it sounds corny. This is my calling. This is my way of honoring her legacy as a physician by working with her colleagues. These are a few of our success stories. So whenever someone says some misinformed know-it-all doctor tells me, well, you can't make any changes. They said it's non-negotiable and I tried and I got a good deal. BS. You didn't do a good job. You think you did and you didn't. These are actual results that our doctors get. So this doctor went from 390 to 549, 41% increase. She didn't leave her employer. She stayed with her current employer, got paid a massive amount of money more to do it. And on top of that, my fee was covered by the employer because we got her a bonus of 40K. So my fee was less than half of this for this doctor. So what's that, like 3% of what she actually got? And God forbid you look at it year over year. Another one, this guy increases a neurosurgeon, increased his signing bonus by 100%, 25,000 to 50,000. How happy do you think his financial advisor was with that? This doctor, here's a group of 6 doctors. On average, they got an increase of $137,000, and they stayed with their current employer. They did not go anywhere. So when a doctor tells me, oh, it can't be changed, I got a good deal. No, you didn't. You're bad at it. I'm better at it than you. And the way we put it to a test is put me in your clinic, right? You think I'm going to walk into your clinic and start caring for patients? No, like that'd be a joke. So again, you're bad at it. You're not supposed to be good at it. And if you are good at it, I would wonder how good of a doctor you are. So how do you do it yourself? First and foremost, you must have courage. This is not something that is easy. It's simple. The steps are very simple, but it's not easy. Change is incredibly hard. The idea of change is incredibly hard. And so I often refer back to Brene Brown, and I think about the fact that negotiation has very little to do with BATNA and technical and options. It has a lot more to do with courage. And the doctors that I just showed you, their success stories, those are the doctors that had courage when it came to advocating for their value. So now I'm going to give you the steps for you to do it yourself. Now, there's going to be some smarty pants in the room who's saying, Ethan, I can do it myself. I'm going to go in and ask for a raise and I'm going to get it. No, you're not. And I'm telling you, you're not, because I was the one on the other side of the table saying, hey, Dr. Smith, I hear you. You're an amazing doctor. And I give you all these reasons why I'm not going to pay you more or give you more support. So save yourself the time. You're incredibly valuable. Save yourself the embarrassment of having to like eat crow and then call me. Here's how you do it yourself. Here is the blueprint for you to do it yourself. First and foremost, you must figure out how much should I be paid relative to the market. It's very similar to looking for a house. What is a home price relative to the other home prices in that area? The same thing for you. What is my specialty being paid in my care setting with my years of experience and how busy I am? Those are the four things that matter, nothing else, right? So, and care setting, do not talk to your colleagues. Too many misinformed doctors are like, well, Josh got more money, so I should be paid what Josh is. Josh is independently wealthy. Josh doesn't care about money, right? Are you independently wealthy? You can't use someone else's experience as a driver for what you should be paid. So go to the data, evidence-based, go to the data. Secondarily, pull your volume. Again, I know doctors are focused on outcomes and patients and relationships, but hospital executives like myself are focused on RVUs, CPT codes. How busy are you? What is your turnover? So you must pull your volume, because this is going to tell you the price of your house. How valuable are you to the market based on how busy you are? I know that's not how doctors think, but that's how executives think. And then lastly, this is again non-negotiable. You must do this step or you will have a bad time. You must get a job offer, even if you plan to stay. Again, this is the hard work. When you tell your patients, hey, if you want to lose weight, you must do these three things. Well, can I just exercise? No, you must exercise and change your diet. So I'm saying you must get the data and get a job offer. It is non-negotiable. So the reason for that is when you ask your employer for a salary raise, I'm going to say some creative and eloquent version of no. When you have a job offer, now you can come in and say, I want to stay, I'm happy here, but I can't turn down an offer for better schedule, more support, more money. What can you do to help make it easier for me to stay? So now you know how to do it yourself. Do not keep us a secret. Talk with your friends about your salary, because what you're going to find is one of you in the group is paid unfairly. And if you're like the doctors that I work with, you don't deserve that. You don't appreciate that. You don't provide less care so that way you're paid lower. You're providing the best care for your patients, just like your colleagues. So I want to offer education for you. You don't have to work with me to talk with me, right? I want to see, again, my mom is a doctor. So I take my time with doctors and my conversations with doctors incredibly seriously. And I want to add value for you first before I even consider working with you, because we're not a fit for every doctor. The doctors who come and say, oh yeah, I got a good deal, cool, go do it yourself again. We're not a good fit for you. We treat the patient who want to be treated. And for us, that's the doctors who know that they deserve better. So with that, I'll pause and just check in with Sydney M and see if there's any other questions, and hand it over to Ross.
Anything, Sydney?
Let's see here. I guess we have one question. Let's see in the chat. Just the comment to discuss any non-competes, if that is part of.
Yes, let's talk about non-competes really quickly. So non-competes are nonsense. A lot of like really smart doctors say, like, I talked to a doctor this week. Well, now that non-competes are not a thing, just stop. That is not relevant. That's academic. I live in the world of practical. So I'll tell you a super quick story about how I eat non-competes for breakfast. I was working with a group of 6 OBGYN doctors who were working at a hospital in the heart of a large city. They hired me because they were really frustrated with their for-profit, large national health system employer. So what I did was I went in and I talked to their employer and I said, hey, these doctors are amazing. They're severely and criminally underpaid. So respectfully, I'd like for you to pay them a little bit more money, better schedule, and they need consistent support in their practice. Employer followed the script and they said, nope, we cannot pay them any more. We don't have any more services or resources for them. I said, okay, I thought you might say that. Just so you know, I have offers from all three of your competitors right across the street. CEO says to me, well, Ethan, no disrespect, but you know that violates their non-compete, right? Absolutely it does. And just so you know, their new employer has looked at each of their non-compete penalties and written them a check in the form of a bonus. So that way, when they join, they will have every single dollar from that new employer to pay the non-compete penalty. So if you decide to come after them, they'll pay the penalty. If you don't come after them because you're doing the right thing and you have a heart, now those doctors have six figures in their pocket that they're going to take to Ross to figure out what to do with. So non-competes mean nothing to me. They are a speed bump on the road of life. It's like turbulence on an airport. You wouldn't stop going to Hawaii for that trip you've planned because of turbulence. Likewise, you don't prevent giving your patients the best version of yourself because of this big bad boogeyman, the non-compete. Great question.
Ross, anything to add to that?
You know, Ethan's the first guy I've ever met that eats non-competes for breakfast. That's fascinating.
Nom, nom, nom.
All right. My screen visible? Thumbs up?
Yes.
Good deal. All right. Ethan, well done. Nailed it within 30 minutes as well. So I think the goal here is to keep this within an hour-ish. So Sydney, just holler if there's any other questions that come up. But gang, thanks for jumping in, and for those who eventually will watch the recording. Again, my name's Ross Polking. I'm a Senior Business Development Advisor with Foster Group, who maybe many of you on the call or the recording will be familiar with our firm. So just real quick logistics on who we are. Ethan kept referring to us as the ones who will have a solution to what you do with this extra money. So for 35-ish years now, we've been helping physicians make good decisions with their dollars and avoid costly mistakes. We're headquartered in West Des Moines. I actually sit in Omaha, so we have two locations. I've been here for 12 years. I'm a central Iowa native, small town Pella. But what's most important to you folks probably on this screen right here, just from a credibility standpoint, not unlike what Ethan walked through on his profile, we're not exclusive to physicians, but we're well endowed in that industry. And so of our close to 2,000 clients, we serve close to 600 physician households across the country. Not everybody retires to Iowa, Nebraska. So our name and our information and our contacts, our services are available wherever. And we're recommended by white coat investors. So many of you might be familiar with that outlet, but certainly comes again with a lot of credibility in what ultimately we do and how we serve physicians. Gang, we're the last piece on here, again, that's super important, is we're independent and we're fee only. We are 100% pure fiduciary. We don't sell any products. We don't work on commission. And I know you're all heavily solicited too. And that's really what got us into the physician market many, many years ago, is that doctors wanted to work with folks who weren't just going to sell them something. And so that's been our story now for 35 plus years. And ultimately, our job is, like I said, to help physicians make good decisions with their money, which can be hard for you all, right? When you try to navigate this on your own, because not unlike your profession, when you have patients come into the office, there's so much noise in the market. People going on WebMD, or people talking to friends, or what's wrong with me. And again, no different in our industry, right? There's talking heads on the TV and in articles and blogs and podcasts saying do this, do that. There's obviously political ramifications or economic woes, all this information that comes flying at us in the form of noise. but what's really ultimately helpful, what's actually useful. And that's our job, is to help sort through that, ultimately, remove emotion. And so just to be clear, right, for everybody who's listening, and Sydney said we've got a wide span of folks who are registered for this conversation, or who ultimately will listen to this. And so there will be bits and pieces of this that may not be applicable to everybody listening, but in its entirety, it's certainly meant to span, hey, as a physician, again, what do I do with this excess monies? How do I make sure that my trajectory towards not just an ideal retirement, but financial independence is squarely on track? And I think everybody can relate to this this timeline, essentially. You know, the understanding of a financial life of a doctor, right? You're getting your start 10 to 15 years after a lot of your peers that maybe you went to undergrad with. Ethan hit this one upside the head, which I really appreciated. Right, there's you get no training in medical school. You're all the smartest people in the room, absolutely, but you get very little training, if any, not only to manage a dollar, but some of you to manage a business. And you come away with high student loan debt, which permeates many, many years. Not for everybody, but for a lot of folks. This idea that there's really no clear path towards financial independence, or what that even looks like. It's like all of a sudden you just, after Ethan helps you renegotiate a contract and you get a lot of dollars for the first time, instead of, you know, the 60,000 in residency, all of a sudden we're talking about exponentially more money. It's like, what do we do with this? And how do I make sure, like, hey, if my goal is to retire at 55 or 60 or 65, what does that look like? And thus, you know, obviously with your hectic schedules, very little time to create a plan. And ultimately, you know, there's an inflection point down the road where you get a chance to look back and say, boy, I wish I would have known some of these things back then that I know now. And so, again, just to be clear, like the rest of this conversation today, and again, probably not unlike a lot of what Ethan shared, it's information that our physician clients have told us now that they're 20, 30, 40 years down the road in their careers and are retired. They've told us they wish someone would have told them back when they were coming out of medical school, or maybe even medical school, that they know now. It's just like time's on their side when they're early in their career. And so just to take advantage of that. And so this is a rule that we're going to constantly reflect on throughout this conversation. A lot of people assume that when you talk about finances and investments and all the things that go with financial planning, like it's going to be super complex, right? And all of a sudden I'm going to start throwing out terms that are going to make your head spin. That's not the idea. This is the point is not to be overly complex. And obviously there's a direct correlation between effectiveness and simplicity. And you'll probably see throughout this, I'm a big fan of napkin drawings. So we'll have a few throughout this. Okay. So let's get started. The idea of planning for an ideal retirement. And again, I'm going to use intermittently or interchangeably this idea of planning also for financial independence. Because you may, and believe it or not, and I love, we talk to a lot of young medical student groups, resident groups, young physician groups. And the one comment that I make probably more than any that gets them to perk up in their seats is that not everybody in the room may want to be a physician the rest of their life, or at least their working years. Like there may come a point in time when there's burnout, or there's just other interests, or might be hobbies, just other career aspirations. And if individuals like yourselves have latched yourself on to a certain level of income and lifestyle, that also includes debt or the inability to leave your job, well, then you're not financially independent. So that's the idea, is retirement's one thing, but financially independent is almost another. And so again, if you want the freedom to choose a different career path, maybe by your early 50s, that's really what we're aiming for, not necessarily retirement. So context on the pictures here. I'm a youth basketball coach for a couple of my girls. Done it for many, many years. Ethan's a big basketball nut and coach as well at a little bit higher level. But I also love quotes on top of napkin drawings. And this one here on the screen, I don't have the actual author, but it applies well to these pictures. And this idea of pursuing an ideal retirement starts with drawing up the plan like a roadmap, which is no good if you do not execute and be held accountable to the plan. And I love to call timeouts in games, not I like to call them for strategy purposes, not just to start barking at people. But the same thing holds true in like your office, right? Or in a clinical setting, or you're seeing a patient. You may give them, your patient, a roadmap to success, right? You need to do this and that and this and that, take this med and go through this physical therapy and, cut some weight, etc. That patient leaves your office, you're not going to hold their hand, right? They have to go out and do it. And just like these girls on screen, it's like I can draw up a play in a timeout huddle, but if they go out and they don't execute it, they just forget what we just talked about, things are going to fall apart. And again, it's like bring it back to what we do in the financial planning world, the investing world. It's like giving people a plan and sticking to it is critical, as simple as that plan might be. So knowing there's execution and accountability that comes along with it. So this is going to get us started when we talk about steps towards planning for ideal retirement, financial independence. I'll start with another quote. Yogi Berra, I'm a big baseball guy as well. And Yogi was famous for random kind of obscure quotes, but if you don't know where you're going, you might wind up someplace else. And so the very first step in planning for an ideal retirement is, everybody, grab your stomach, but it's setting goals. And most people are like, goals are hard. The earlier in your career, even harder. But it's important. You've got to know what you're aiming for in order to plan for an ideal retirement. So what are we aiming for? Okay. So that's first step. All right. Pretty simple. Simple and effectiveness are correlated. So this next step then is what we call financial check-in. And again, no different than when patients are coming to see you as physicians, right? They come into a waiting room, they get checked in, and then there's a bunch of information that they either have to provide or validate on maybe a clipboard or an iPad. And so this is the rundown essentially of that check-in or that checklist. Like, we've got to get things down on paper or on screen. You've got to know what you're working with. Otherwise, it's really difficult to build a plan. And this napkin drawing is a good reminder as well that when you think about your financial life, it does not boil down to just investments. It's a piece of the puzzle. If this is a circular puzzle, I guess it's a piece. But there are many, many other pieces. And it doesn't matter how well your investments may perform. If the rest of your plan, if the rest of the components of your plan are not in sync, or off track, or completely missing, anything can blow up. Okay. So we've set goals. We've written, literally, I mean, you can get out a piece of notebook paper or pull up a Word document, however best you want to visualize everything that you have, or use some really intricate financial planning software, whatever, or hire an advisor, right? But whatever it looks like, set goals, you map out what you have in place today so you can measure success. And then we want to walk through and actually diagnose each of the components of the plan. And if there are missing pieces within any of these, we've got things to address, right? They've got holes in the plan ultimately. So I'm going to just tick through these again, being mindful of the time. But the first one that we want to start out with is the team. And you can see the names show up on the back here. Now, this does not encompass maybe your entire team. But what we're trying to articulate here is think about in your profession, right? You are not the only one who's serving your patient. There are many other maybe specialists in your sphere, or even the person at the front desk, right? Everybody has a role and responsibility that they specialize in or that they serve that allows you to do what you do really, really well. And again, reminder, you're all the smartest people in the room. But to try to also articulate and manage each one of these different disciplines well and not be influenced by emotion becomes incredibly difficult, especially as your career goes along and your balance sheet grows and complexity rises, and you want to be the best physician and the best parent and the best spouse, and you have other interests, hobbies. It's like there's just too much to try to navigate each of these pieces on its own. So build your team early. And that should include someone who is a tax mitigation specialist, not just with the letter CPA behind their name, but someone who can be proactive and a consultative voice on the tax mitigation side. Obviously, an attorney, not just in what Ethan does, but certainly someone who is well endowed in estate planning and making sure that your assets are protected. Insurance specialist, someone who's not just going to be there to sell you something, but really help you identify what you need and what you don't. And then a fiduciary advisor. Again, there are many, many financial advisors out there. There's 300,000 to 400,000, some more than a Starbucks or a McDonald's on every corner. But you want to make sure that they are 100% fiduciary, which the minority of folks in the advisory space are true fiduciary. So make sure you ask that question. Okay, so we've got the team in place. Remember, if we're following, kind of just recapping the timeline, we've set goals, we've written everything else out, okay? And now we're starting to tick through, we're diagnosing exactly what we have in place and or building upon, okay? So next piece here is understand your cash flow. And the earlier you are in your career, maybe if there's a, med student or resident listening to this, you're like, well, cash flow, what are you talking about? But it's good to have a framework. And this doesn't have to be the exact formula. Everybody's situation is different, but it's important that ultimately you pay attention to the bottom line here. And again, we talked about it earlier, like simplicity and effectiveness are directly correlated. Okay, so this is just simple math, but believe it or not, many folks, many doctors that we serve find a way to have this percent down here, this ultimate number, be above 100%, right? Living outside their means and relying upon, and we live in a world of credit card and financing and debt today, and it's easy to grow it as that income increases. So just being mindful of telling your money ultimately where to go so that you can stick within this idea of living within your means. And there's a lot of places for cash to go. This is a super busy slide. So again, knowing that it's recorded and get a copy of this, but this is not necessarily in priority order, but to a certain extent, it does give a sense of, all right, when we think about flow of cash, again, rather than letting it all land in a checking account or bank account and just kind of live off it, and once in a while think about saving over here or doing this over there, have a plan. You'll get sick of me using that word. Have a plan on when the dollars arrive, where does this stuff go? So you can tick it off, starting with an emergency fund, making sure that if everything hits the fan, that you have somewhere in the range of 3 to 6 months of living expenses to cover those emergencies. And on down the road here, we look at leveraging 401k plans, maxing out health savings accounts. If you have kids, think about 529 plans. Again, too much on here to walk through everything, but certainly something that as you either navigate your planning on your own or ideally with an advisor, that you want to think about, right? You want to have framework too. And so telling your cash where to go is really key. Next on the list, so again, thinking about, all right, we're diagnosing the situation here, is insurance. And again, probably another sigh from the crowd and like, ugh, but really important. And obviously you all work in an industry that's ripe with risk. And I think the last stat I saw is for physicians who intend to practice to age 65, I think like 90 to 95% of those physicians who practice in 90 or 65 will be sued at some point. Like it's just inevitable. So when we think about insurance, right, there's a specific need for it and that idea of transferring risk. I'm not going to talk about malpractice today. It's really more in these core components. It's like, how do you protect yourselves and your family and your income? And again, way too much. Like we do webinars and whole programs on just insurance alone, and I'm going to give you about a 2-minute version today. So don't try to absorb all this. Just be mindful of what's really important and maybe even more importantly what's not. And the idea is to stick with the plan. What do you need and what do you not? Because there's a lot of insurance agents out there who are happy to sell you anything, okay? Because they have a product, and you as physicians make a lot of money and there are risks. So you do need some of this. But there's a lot of bad stuff out there at the same time. So be mindful when it comes to life insurance and disability. Most of you probably have both of these pieces. The question is, do you have enough and the right stuff? Property casualty, again, making sure that liability limits are specifically coordinated. Long-term care, there's a point in time in which to consider that. And that industry changes all the time. So if there's a best piece of advice I can give you when it comes to deciding what you need for insurance and what you don't, it's this napkin drawing and knowing that there's, again, direct correlation between number of pictures on the beach and the glossy brochure that the agent's going to give you and the speed at which you should run away. It's what is the true intention of the person that you're working with. And that's shoot, I think about the role that we play. It's because we don't sell any insurance because we're a fiduciary. Again, our advice is objective and we help people decide on what do they need and what do they don't, or what do they not need. And even life insurance alone, like this chart right here, can give some of you heartburn. Just all of the different products that exist out there and what some of them do and what they don't. And knowing that there's different costs associated with them and ultimately risks that some of these leave you with versus transferring to an insurance company. So certainly something to make sure that you have baked into your plan. The other piece, even more important, and you have probably all heard this story and there's probably head nods, but disability. Making sure that you're protecting really your most valuable asset, and that's your ability to earn money. And again, reminder for Ethan to help you make all the more. But simple analogy I use a lot of times with med student groups who are super green listening to all this for the first time. It's like, imagine in your basement, you've got a money making machine, like a money printing machine. You push a button and it starts kicking out money. Would you insure that? And the question is, well, yeah, you insure your car, you insure your home. Why wouldn't I insure a machine that prints money? You all are machines. Okay. You all are money printing machines. And it's important that you insure yourselves. So that, which, odds are, believe it or not, someone in this webinar is going to be disabled for a period of time and ultimately need or file for disability insurance if they have it. It's just the odds are during your working years, you're way more likely to become disabled and need disability income insurance than you are to die and rely upon life insurance to replace any form of income or to support dependents and debt that you leave behind. So I'll wrap up the insurance part with very simple, just, hey, what should I do? Like, just tell me what I should do. And these are probably 3 simple things to at least pay attention to if you're to walk away from this or yet today before your day's done. It's like, hey, you have somewhere in the range of 20 to 30 years of term insurance, not permanent insurance. Just make sure you've got the term of 1 to 2 million minimum, up to 5 to 10. And again, everybody's situation is different. So don't take this as advice. You've got to go back to your plan. What do you ultimately need? Some of you may not need life insurance anymore. Just because you're alive doesn't mean you need life insurance. Okay. There's a point in time when you won't need it. But just be mindful of what is kind of just the first step in that process. If you are still practicing, it is typically recommended that you're going to maximize your disability benefit. And it doesn't mean that if your employer is providing it, you've got enough. You want to go through the process of determining, hey, do I need my own individual policy outside of what my employer is providing? Real key important item there is make sure it covers you in your own occupation, not just any occupation that you might be available to go work at and make some money. And then finally, this idea of an umbrella policy. An umbrella policy really covers you on the property casualty side for anything that home and auto insurance policies don't. Again, you as physicians who make a lot of money, and if there are, friends of your kids come over and somebody slips on the front step, hits their head, people know you're physicians, and they know there's probably a lot of dollars on your balance sheet. So umbrella policies provide that extra layer of protection and liability limits to kick in. Okay, we're headed down the home stretch. I'll make sure again we be mindful of time here. But debt, again, most physicians come out of school with 6-figure level. I've never, again, in my 18 years of working in foster group and with a lot of physicians, I've never seen debt levels this high. To be expected, right? Costs are going up all the time, and so having an idea of how to eliminate debt even before you get into it, super important. And we could break it down between objective benefits and emotional subjective benefits. again, I'm going to go back to this one right here, this third bullet. The idea of getting rid of debt provides you with the opportunity to achieve financial independence faster than any other way, no matter how much money you save. Just not being encumbered to anybody else, because there may be a point in time when you choose not to stick to this profession. It may very well come about, but pictures are powerful. This is a super simple idea of, hey, we've got, you know, a $500,000 loan on a home, which, you know, in our world today, this chart probably needs to be updated, right? I'm not sure what type of home, especially maybe out in Ethan's market. I know that doesn't buy much of a home anymore. But this idea of just taking control of your debt and accelerating it as best as you can. And this shows, hey, if I threw an extra $500 a month at this loan at an average interest rate, the overall payment schedule is shortened by 9 years. I'm saving $175,000. Like, it's legitimate money. It's a guaranteed return. The faster you eliminate your debt, you're not paying somebody else to use their money. So think about strategy when it comes to eliminating debt. Again, not to read through all of these, but just be mindful of, before you even enter debt, how are you going to get rid of it? You know, ask yourself if it's income producing, which you've all taken on debt to be an income producing machine. So we get it, right? But now it's time to tackle it and get rid of it. Target those highest interest rate loans, consolidate if it makes sense. And yeah, be mindful of debt forgiveness programs. Now, certainly the one, you know, Ethan talked through, the public service loan forgiveness program. They've changed that program over the past few years. They made it more forgiving, a little more flexible. So just, again, don't rely upon somebody else to tell you these things. Make sure you're educating yourself, digging, you know, seeking out the information and or partnering with someone who can educate you. Sydney, wave your hand if you see any questions show up in the chat. Otherwise, so believe it or not, you know, I operate with you know, represent a firm that's involved in investing and planning, and we're just now getting to investing, but really we're close to the end of the conversation here today. But it's super important that we prioritize all the things that we talked about up to this point before we really put much of a focus on investing. Like, because if any one of those components that we've already talked about, whether it's team or it's debt or it's insurance or it's emergency cash, it's like, it doesn't matter how much we have invested if some of these other pieces aren't addressed first. But simple chart, we're working, we're earning, we're saving, and then we're investing. Make sure we pay attention to this idea of saving before we move to investing. And those are two different things. And again, just emergency cash, right? We just don't know what can and would happen. So baseline is 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses. The only way you can identify how much it costs you to live is you go through the cash flow exercise that we talked about earlier. So have that stored away in a separate savings checking account and don't ever touch it unless a true emergency arises. And then start to think about investing, okay? And again, super simple, like this idea of, well, what do I invest in, right? I mean, that's a common question when folks come to us for the first time. It's like, I just don't understand any of this. So just keep it simple. Don't invest in things you don't understand, first of all. And then understand the risks associated with how it is that you're investing, and try to keep it in two different camps. Stocks and bonds. And, you know, we can walk through, you know, again, this is a whole nother webinar about what is a bond, what is a stock, how do they operate. Just think about bonds as fairly conservative, not meant to grow a lot, but also meant to protect your dollars. Okay, so conservative side of your portfolio, and then the aggressive side, more on the stock side. So investing in individual publicly traded companies. An even safer way to do that is to better diversify your dollars and use vehicles like mutual funds or exchange traded funds, where you're leveraging a quote product from a company like a Vanguard or a Charles Schwab or Fidelity, that they invest in individual companies and provide you as the investor with a fund to put your money into. And so most of you are probably engaged in maybe your company 401k or your hospital, your clinic 401k or 403b, et cetera. And you have different investment options. 98% of the time, those will be funds of some sort, not individual stocks. And so, and that's purposeful. That's, again, meant to lessen your risk and better the element of diversification as you go about it investing. This is more for entertainment purposes than anything, but since we're in an election year, we hear a lot of times it's like, oh, I just, whether it's wars overseas or just name any issue over the course of time, right? There's always a reason that people give to not invest. It's like they want to wait until things calm down a little bit. And we're in an election year, so we still hear that from folks. It's like, I'm not sure now's the right time to invest. Maybe I should get past this election. This is not a political comment. It's just a picture to show that, hey, it doesn't really matter. Like the market is incredibly resilient. So while today's conversation is not meant to tell you what to invest in, it's really just more to encourage you to invest, all right, in the context of your plan, balanced between equities and fixed income, stocks and bonds. Again, just more entertainment purposes, but you can see it doesn't, the market's pretty agnostic when it comes down to who ultimately is controlling the White House and the legislature. And so those particular pieces, while the market does like to know ultimately what's happening or how the government is operating, again, it's super resilient and a great wealth generation tool. So when you think about saving strategy, to sum it up here, you can look here, establish the emergency fund, ignore the headlines, maximize your retirement plans through work. If you have kids, leverage the 529 plans or a triple tax benefit there. Consider then, after all those pieces are ticked off, how you save outside of retirement plans, maybe use backdoor Roth opportunities there, maximize health savings accounts. And then again, ultimately stay diversified. Don't expose yourself to too much risk on the investment side. Taxes permeate everything. That if there's one comment we hear most from physicians when they first come knock on our doors, it's, hey, I need help with the planning and taxes are driving me crazy. So it's harder, right? The more money you make, the harder it is to mitigate the tax burden that you all bear. And again, it depends on stage of life and size of balance sheet and the other things you're involved in. But certainly some things to pay attention to. Again, not to walk through all of these because everybody's in a different stage of life, but there are certainly opportunities out there. Don't just capitulate and say, I'm just got to pay Uncle Sam what I got to pay him. It's like, well, there are opportunities to mitigate and not avoid, but simply just mitigate tax burden that you're due on an annual basis. Final component here, and then I promise we are done, is estate planning. So just make sure, again, that you don't let the government decide what happens to your monies or your assets when you pass. So the statistics suggest that most people actually do not have a will or trust, powers of attorney, those components of an estate plan in place. And if you're a young physician, single, haven't started a family, this isn't super applicable, but it's important to know that when it does become applicable, you get it done right away because life will get hectic and even more crazy at that point. So have some of these things in mind, where to start, again, listing your assets, seek out an attorney that is a specialist, not only in estate planning, but is familiar really with the healthcare industry. And you just navigate through that process, title assets accordingly, and make sure, probably every 3 to 5 years, you're taking a peek at those documents, make sure they're fresh. I think I got one more napkin drawing after this, but just, Venn diagram here, things that matter and things you can control. The intersection there is really what you ought to focus on and not get caught up in all the things that, again, will be outside of your control. And how you determine this is really starting back to the beginning of this conversation, mapping out what you have in the context of goals, and then ticking through each of those particular pieces that need to pay attention to. So what you can control now, summary of what really I rolled through here. So again, reflected on the slide deck and in the recording if you want to harken back to it. But hopefully throughout the conversation, you're either nodding your head like, yep, I got that done, or nope, I need to pay more attention to that. And again, none of this needs to be overly complex, but it is emotional. Okay. Every dollar that you spend, whether you're going to the convenience store and deciding between a bag of chips or you're deciding how much to invest inside of a retirement plan through work, it's like everything comes with an element of emotion. And so having things down, doing it objectively, working with someone who, again, operates as a fiduciary, really, really important, because ultimately, like every single dollar, there is a point, there's an inflection point where that happiness just starts to level off. And it's different for everybody. There's been a lot of studies done on this. It's pretty fascinating, but there is a point. And I can say, you know, again, in my working years, that our happiest clients are not necessarily the ones with the biggest balance sheet. So a plan that comes with a sense of peace and confidence really ultimately allows, you know, this correlation to continue. So gang, my contact info here. Really appreciate just tuning in and hearing what Ethan and I have to say. So I'll take a breath. Sydney, any questions specific to what I covered there? And I guess if anything as well came up for Ethan as well.
I'm looking in the chat. Does anyone else have any questions? I'm not seeing any in my chat, and feel free to unmute and ask questions or message the chat, or if you would rather message me directly, I can relay questions if anyone has anything there. Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much, Ross. And at this time, still not seeing any questions. So thank you all so much for listening. And whether you're joining us live or listening to the recorded version of this presentation, thank you to Ethan and Nkana and Ross Polking, as well as our partner Foster Group, for your knowledge and expertise on the subject, for our medical student, resident, and physician audience and beyond. If anyone has any follow-up questions at a later time, or about anything we talked about or anything else, please feel free to reach out to Foster Group or to the Iomedical Society. You can email us at contactims@iomedical.org. We can help connect you with Foster Group and with our presenters today. I guess Ethan and Ross, anything else to add?
Yes. Doctors deserve better. Don't wait, renegotiate.
Great.
I don't have as fancy of a final line as that, but no, just appreciate, you know, shoot, we appreciate what the physicians do for our communities and the ones we care about. So anything we can do to help further their ability to live life with peace and confidence is that's what we're here for. So thanks for the opportunity, Sydney.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yes.